The Aurora's blade screamed through the void like a silver arrow aimed at the heart of tyranny. Captain Daniel's scarred hands gripped the command console, his knuckles white against the polished metal as alarms shrieked their warnings. The Kha'Vren blockade loomed ahead, a wall of obsidian warships that had strangled Earth's attempts at galactic diplomacy for 3 long years. "Shields at 60% and falling," called the engineer from his station, stylus clenched between his teeth as he wrestled with failing systems. Oil stains marked his fingers like war paint, and his bloodshot eyes reflected the crimson warning lights that bathed the bridge. Daniel's jaw clenched, that familiar tell before every impossible decision. His hazel eyes narrowed as he calculated angles, velocities, and the slim margins between breakthrough and annihilation. The worn dog tag around his neck caught the light, a ghost's blessing from his last failed mission when he'd lost half his crew to Kha'Vren plasma fire. "Cora, I need those forward deflectors redistributed now," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. Diplomat Cora's fingers flew across her console, auburn hair escaping its practical knot as she recalibrated the shield matrix. Her green eyes blazed with fierce concentration, glasses sliding down her freckled nose as she worked. "Rerouting power from life support," she announced, her voice steady despite the hull groaning around them. "We'll have maybe 2 minutes before the air recyclers fail." The Kha'Vren formation shifted, their massive ships turning like predators scenting wounded prey. Energy readings spiked across the tactical display as weapon systems powered up. Daniel had seen this dance before, the slow, contemptuous response of a superior force to what they considered a gnat's irritation. "Commander, we're being hailed," reported the communications officer, his young face pale with terror. "Ignore it," Daniel ordered, his voice iron hard. He stood at the bridge's center, hands clasped behind his back in the classic stance of command. But his shoulders carried the weight of every soul aboard, every human hope riding on this desperate gambit. The lead Kha'Vren vessel, a dreadnought the size of a small moon, rotated its primary weapons toward them. Daniel could almost see the amber eyes of the commander who'd humiliated him at the last diplomatic summit, those reptilian features twisted with disdain for the primitive mammals who dared challenge their authority. 30 seconds to optimal ramming speed, the engineer called, his voice cracking slightly. The stylus had migrated to his hands, twirling between nervous fingers as he monitored the engine output. "Hull integrity is holding, but those plasma cannons will tear us apart if we don't." "We'll make it," Daniel interrupted, his certainty a bulwark against the crew's fear. He touched the dog tag briefly, feeling the metal warm against his palm. "Cora, how's our diplomatic package?" "Secured and ready for transmission once we reach the Concord station," she replied, adjusting her glasses with a quick gesture. Her fingers drummed against the console, 1, 2, 3, 4, a rhythmic tell that betrayed her racing thoughts. "The treaty's encrypted 6 ways from Sunday. Even if they board us, they won't crack it in time." The Kha'Vren formation opened fire. Plasma bolts the size of shuttlecraft streaked past the Aurora's blade, each near miss sending shock waves through the hull. Daniel felt the deck plates shudder beneath his feet, heard the distant crash of unsecured equipment in the lower decks. But they were through the outer perimeter now, dancing between the massive ships like a minnow among whales. "Cora!" Daniel shouted as a plasma bolt grazed their port shield, sending cascades of sparks across the bridge. "I need those rear deflectors." Her hands moved with desperate efficiency, green eyes reflecting the tactical display as she juggled power distribution like a master musician playing a symphony of survival. "Compensating for the port hit," she called back, her voice steady despite the ship bucking around them. "Forward momentum is good, but we're bleeding plasma from the starboard conduits." The engineer was already moving, his stocky frame scrambling toward the damaged systems with practiced urgency. "I can patch it," he grunted, oil-stained hands already selecting the right tools from his cluttered belt. "Give me 90 seconds." 90 seconds they didn't have. The Kha'Vren dreadnought was rotating to bring its main guns to bear, the massive weapons tracking their trajectory with mechanical precision. Daniel could see the energy buildup in the targeting arrays, the telltale glow that preceded obliteration. "Evasive pattern Delta 7, he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "All hands brace for impact." The Aurora's blade twisted through space, her hull groaning as the structural reinforcements strained against forces they were never designed to handle. But she held together, this ship of human dreams and human desperation, carrying them through the gap between two Kha'Vren cruisers with meters to spare. And then they were through. The galactic Concord station hung before them like a jeweled crown against the stars, its neutral zones marked by the soft blue glow of diplomatic immunity. Daniel allowed himself one moment of triumph before the reality crashed back. The Kha'Vren weren't giving up. Their ships were turning, regrouping, preparing to pursue even into neutral space. "Cora," he said quietly, his scarred hands steady on the controls, "I hope you're ready for the hardest negotiation of your career." She looked up from her console, glasses glinting as she met his gaze. Her green eyes held the same fierce determination that had driven them through the blockade, tempered now with the knowledge of what lay ahead. "With respect, Captain," she said, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's last hope, "I've been ready since Earth first looked up at the stars." The Aurora's blade limped toward the station, her hull scarred but unbroken, carrying the dreams of an entire species toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the Kha'Vren blockade reformed, waiting with predatory patience for their prey to emerge from the sanctuary of neutral space. The real battle was just beginning. The galactic Concord station stretched before them like a crystalline cathedral, its transparent walls offering breathtaking views of the nebula beyond. But Daniel found no peace in the beauty. His sharp hazel eyes tracked the docking procedures with military precision, cataloging every potential threat. The Aurora's blade settled into her berth with a shudder that spoke of hull stress and system failures. Her wounds from the blockade run still bleeding atmosphere and coolant. "Docking clamps secured," reported the engineer, his voice hoarse from breathing recycled air. The stylus had returned to his mouth, a nervous habit that had intensified since their harrowing escape. "But we're not going anywhere fast. The port engine's down to 30% efficiency, and the starboard plasma conduits are held together with prayer and fusion tape." Daniel nodded curtly, his jaw clenched as he absorbed the damage report. The dog tag around his neck felt heavier somehow, weighted with the knowledge that their ship might not survive another encounter with the Kha'Vren fleet. His scarred hands moved across the command console, securing systems with practiced efficiency. "Cora, you're on point for the diplomatic meeting," he said, his voice carrying the clipped authority of a man who'd learned to waste no words. "I'll handle the welcoming committee." The station's main concourse buzzed with alien activity, a kaleidoscope of species going about their business with the casual indifference of those who'd never known blockade or desperation. Daniel's rigid posture drew curious glances from passing diplomats, his weathered human features a rarity in this corner of the galaxy. He stood with his shoulders squared, hands clasped behind his back, projecting the authority of Earth's military despite the patches on his uniform and the exhaustion in his eyes. Cora emerged from the diplomatic preparation chamber, her auburn hair now properly secured, and her wire-rimmed glasses polished to a shine. Her green eyes held the fierce intelligence that had gotten them through the blockade, but Daniel could see the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers adjusted her glasses in a gesture that betrayed her racing thoughts. "The preliminary meeting is in Conference Bay 7, she reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of their task. "Representatives from 12 species, including the Kha'Vren." Her lips pursed slightly at the mention of their antagonists, a fleeting expression of distaste that spoke volumes about the challenges ahead. They walked through the station's corridors in companionable silence, their footsteps echoing off the polished walls. Daniel's presence beside her was steady, reassuring, a reminder that Earth's military stood behind its diplomats, ready to fight for humanity's place among the stars. The conference bay opened before them like an arena, its curved walls designed to accommodate the varied physiologies of galactic species. Daniel took his position near the entrance, his weathered features impassive as he surveyed the assembled aliens. His role here was symbolic, the sword behind the shield, the promise of Earth's resolve made manifest in scarred flesh and determined eyes. Cora approached the central dais with fluid grace, her movements confident despite the weight of expectation. The assembled diplomats watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. A squat, crystalline being from the refractive collective flickered with disdainful light patterns, while a graceful representative of the stellar hegemony examined her with compound eyes that revealed nothing. "Honored delegates," Cora began, her voice carrying clearly through the bay's acoustics. "I come before you as a representative of Earth, seeking recognition of our species' right to participate in galactic commerce and diplomacy." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembly. The Kha'Vren commander, Daniel recognized the scum, even at this distance, rose from his position with predatory grace. His obsidian scales caught the light as he moved, amber eyes glowing with barely contained hostility. "The humans presume much," the commander said, his voice a low hiss that carried undertones of violence. "Your species has existed in our galaxy for barely a century. You have no established trade routes, no technological innovations worthy of note, no cultural achievements that merit recognition." Cora's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "With respect, Commander, humanity has demonstrated its resilience and innovation repeatedly. Our breakthrough in quantum fold technology alone—" "Stolen," the commander interrupted, his tail lashing with sudden violence. "Reverse-engineered from captured hegemony vessels. Your species' only notable skill seems to be theft and mimicry." Daniel felt his scarred hands clench into fists, his hazel eyes narrowing to dangerous slits. The accusation was false. Humanity's quantum fold drive was their own innovation, born from desperate necessity and human ingenuity. But to call the commander a liar here would be to violate every diplomatic protocol. Cora adjusted her glasses, buying herself a moment to compose her response. "Our development of quantum fold technology was indeed inspired by contact with galactic civilization," she said carefully. "But the implementation is entirely our own. We've improved upon existing designs, increasing efficiency by 30% while reducing power requirements." A murmur of interest passed through the assembly. The neutral alien envoy, a bioluminescent being whose skin pulsed with soft blue light, leaned forward slightly, its multiple limbs weaving patterns in the air. "These improvements," it said in a voice like wind chimes, "they could benefit interstellar commerce?" "Indeed," Cora replied, her green eyes brightening with enthusiasm. "Our modifications to the quantum fold matrix could revolutionize cargo transport, reducing costs and increasing safety margins across all trade routes." The Kha'Vren commander's amber eyes flared with sudden fury. Empty promises from a species that has never successfully completed a single interstellar trade mission. The blockade exists for good reason. Humans are unreliable, their technology unstable, their word worthless. "The blockade exists," Daniel said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years' frustration, "because you're afraid of what we might achieve if given the chance." The commander's head snapped toward him, reptilian features twisted with rage. "The military arm speaks for the diplomatic corps? How primitive!" His claws clicked against the metal floor as he moved closer, using his towering height to intimidate. "Your species' true nature reveals itself. Violence first, reason second." Daniel didn't flinch, his weathered features impassive as he met the alien's glowing gaze. "I've seen your idea of reason, Commander. It looks a lot like tyranny from where I'm standing." The conference bay fell silent, the tension crackling between the two figures like electricity before a storm. Cora watched the confrontation with calculating eyes, her diplomatic mind already working on ways to turn this moment to humanity's advantage. "The human captain speaks truth," the bioluminescent envoy said suddenly, its skin pulsing with curious patterns. "The Kha'Vren blockade affects all galactic trade, not just human commerce. Our routes through the outer systems have become complicated." The commander's tail lashed again, betraying his anger at this unexpected support. "The trade collective has no standing to question Kha'Vren policy. Your concerns are noted and dismissed." "Actually," Cora interjected smoothly, "the trade collective has every right to question policies that affect interstellar commerce. Article 7 of the Galactic Accords clearly states, Enough! The commander roared, his voice echoing through the bay. This farce has continued long enough. Humans have no standing in galactic law, no right to invoke the Accords. You are tolerated here only through the courtesy of neutral space. Daniel stepped forward, his presence filling the space between Cora and the enraged alien. Then let's discuss toleration, Commander. My ship made it through your blockade. Your impenetrable line was penetrated by a single human vessel. What does that say about Kha'Vren's superiority? The commander's amber eyes blazed with fury, but before he could respond, the station's communication system crackled to life. All delegates to Conference Bay 7 announced the station's AI, its voice neutral and mechanical. Priority message from the Galactic Concord Authority. Transmission will commence in 10 minutes. The assembled aliens stirred with interest, but Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Priority messages from the Concord Authority were rare, usually reserved for matters of galactic security or major diplomatic crises. He caught Cora's eye, saw his own concern reflected in her green gaze. Whatever was coming, it would change everything. The priority transmission flickered to life on the conference bay's central display, casting ghostly blue light across the assembled delegates. Daniel watched from his position near the wall, his scarred hands unconsciously fingering the dog tag that hung beneath his uniform. The metal felt warm against his palm, a tangible reminder of the weight he carried, not just for this mission, but for all the missions that had come before. 3 years ago, Kepler Station, the memory hit him like a physical blow, as vivid as the day it happened. Commander Danny Marshall's face, pale with shock as the Kha'Vren ships emerged from fold space. The desperate scramble to evacuate the research station, the screaming of alarms as plasma bolts tore through the hull. Daniel's younger self, less weathered but no less determined, shouting orders that came too late to save everyone. "Captain, we need to go!" Danny's voice echoed across the years, urgent and afraid. "The station's shields are failing." But Daniel had hesitated, paralyzed by the impossible choice between duty and survival. 7 seconds. That's all it had taken for the Kha'Vren to target the escape pods, turning rescue into slaughter. Danny's pod had been the first to die, her final transmission a crackle of static and human courage. Daniel's jaw clenched as he forced the memory away, focusing on the present. The dog tag, Danny's dog tag, felt heavy against his chest, a constant reminder of the price of hesitation. He'd sworn that day to never again let fear dictate his actions, to push forward no matter the cost. Across the bay, Cora was studying the transmission with the same intensity she'd once brought to her graduate thesis on xenocultural dynamics. Her green eyes reflected the display's light, and Daniel could see her mind working, analyzing, calculating. Her journey to this moment had been different, but no less painful. 5 years ago, Earth's diplomatic academy, "Miss Hawthorne," Professor Martinez had said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "your analysis of the hegemony trade protocols is unconventional." Cora had stood before the review board, her auburn hair longer then, her glasses newer, her confidence still forming like metal in a forge. "With respect, Professor, conventional analysis has failed to establish meaningful contact with the hegemony for over a decade. Perhaps unconventional thinking is precisely what we need." The board had laughed, actually laughed, at her audacity. A human graduate student challenging established doctrine, proposing radical new approaches to alien psychology. They'd nearly failed her, would have if not for the intervention of Ambassador Reynolds, who'd seen something in the young woman's fierce determination. "The galaxy doesn't care about our conventions," Reynolds had told her privately. "It cares about results. Remember that." Cora had remembered, carrying those words through years of study and preparation, through the humiliation of junior postings and the slow climb up the diplomatic ladder. Every setback had sharpened her resolve. Every failure had taught her something new about the alien mind. Now, watching the priority transmission unfold, Daniel and Cora both felt the weight of their shared history. The message was routine, a trade dispute between the Mineral Consortium and the Agricultural Collective, but embedded within the bureaucratic language was something else entirely. Did you catch that?" Cora whispered, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the conference bay. Her fingers tapped against her datapad, 1, 2, 3, 4, the familiar rhythm that meant her mind was racing. Daniel nodded slightly, his sharp eyes having caught the same anomaly. Resource allocation codes that didn't match standard distribution patterns. Shipping manifests that listed destinations in sectors supposedly under Kha'Vren control. Trade volumes that exceeded reported capacity by significant margins. The hegemony route through Sector 7, he murmured, his military training allowing him to read between the lines. Those numbers don't add up. No, they don't, Cora agreed, her analytical mind already working through the implications. The Kha'Vren have been reporting reduced capacity in that sector for the past 18 months, claiming technical difficulties with their fold gates. But these shipping records suggest full capacity, Daniel finished, his scarred hands clenching into fists. They've been hoarding resources, manipulating trade reports to drive up prices. The transmission ended, leaving the conference bay in relative silence. The other delegates were already dispersing, treating the message as routine administrative business. But Daniel and Cora remained, their minds working through the implications of what they'd discovered. "Captain," Cora said quietly, adjusting her glasses in the gesture that meant she was thinking hard, "if the Kha'Vren have been manipulating galactic trade for their own benefit, then the blockade isn't just about keeping humanity out," Daniel said, his voice grim. "It's about keeping everyone else in line." They walked back toward the Aurora's blade in thoughtful silence, their footsteps echoing through the station's corridors. Daniel's rigid posture betrayed nothing of the turmoil in his mind, but Cora could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked every shadow and alcove. "Daniel," she said softly, using his first name in the way that meant they were speaking as partners, not just captain and diplomat. "That look in your eyes when the Kha'Vren commander mentioned Kepler Station." He stopped walking, his weathered features hardening into the mask he wore when the past threatened to overwhelm him. "7 dead," he said simply. 7 people who trusted me to get them home." "It wasn't your fault," Cora said gently. "The intelligence report said the sector was clear. No one knew the Kha'Vren had moved their patrol routes." "I knew," Daniel replied, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years' guilt. "In my gut, I knew something was wrong, but I followed protocol instead of instinct. Danny died because I hesitated." Cora placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but steady. "And now you never hesitate. You ran the blockade when anyone else would have turned back. You stood up to the commander when diplomacy demanded silence. Danny's death wasn't meaningless if it taught you to trust your instincts." Daniel looked at her, seeing the fierce intelligence that had driven her from academic obscurity to the front lines of galactic diplomacy. "What about you? What drives the brilliant diplomat who sees patterns everyone else misses?" Cora's green eyes clouded with memory. "My father," she said quietly. "He was a mining engineer, worked the asteroid belts before the Kha'Vren restricted human access. He used to say that aliens weren't better than us, just different, that if we could learn to understand them, we could find our place among the stars." "What happened to him?" "Mining accident," Cora said, her voice carefully neutral. "Official report blamed equipment failure, but the equipment was Kha'Vren manufactured and the safety protocols were written by Kha'Vren engineers. Dad always said those protocols were inadequate for human physiology. But who was going to listen to a human miner?" Daniel understood. They were both carrying the weight of the dead, both driven by the need to ensure that others wouldn't share their losses. The blockade wasn't just about trade routes or diplomatic recognition. It was about the fundamental question of whether humanity deserved to survive in a galaxy that seemed determined to keep them in their place. "The engineer's right," Daniel said suddenly, his tactical mind already working through the implications of what they'd discovered. "We're not going anywhere fast. The Aurora's blade needs at least 48 hours for basic repairs, and that's assuming we can get the parts we need." "Which gives us time to investigate," Cora said, her diplomatic instincts already formulating a plan. "Those shipping records, the resource allocations, there's a pattern here, Daniel, something bigger than just keeping humans out of galactic trade." They reached the ship's airlock, where the engineer was elbow-deep in a plasma conduit, his stocky frame contorted as he worked in the cramped space. Oil stains marked his coveralls like a map of the ship's wounds, and the stylus in his mouth bobbed with his muttered curses. "How long?" Daniel asked, his voice carrying the authority of command tempered by genuine concern for his crew. 2 days, minimum, the engineer replied without looking up. "The port engine's completely shot, and the starboard conduits are fused in 3 places. I can patch her up, but she won't be pretty." "Pretty doesn't matter," Daniel said. "Functional does." The engineer nodded, understanding the unspoken urgency. They all knew the Kha'Vren fleet was still out there, waiting for them to leave the protection of neutral space. Every hour they remained on the station was another hour for their enemies to prepare. "There's something else," the engineer said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been monitoring the station's communication channels. There's been a lot of encrypted traffic between the Kha'Vren ships and someone on the station. Can't decrypt it, but the volume suggests they're planning something." Daniel and Cora exchanged glances, their shared understanding deepening. The pattern was becoming clearer: the manipulated trade reports, the resource hoarding, the encrypted communications. The Kha'Vren weren't just enforcing a blockade, they were orchestrating something much larger. "Keep monitoring," Daniel ordered, "and see if you can trace the source of those transmissions. Someone on this station is working with them." As the engineer returned to his work, Daniel and Cora stood in the airlock, looking out at the vast structure of the galactic Concord station. Somewhere in that maze of corridors and chambers, answers waited to be found. The truth about the Kha'Vren's real agenda, about the corruption that seemed to permeate galactic trade, about humanity's chances of survival in a hostile galaxy. "We have 2 days," Cora said quietly, her green eyes reflecting the starlight beyond the station's transparent walls. 2 days to uncover the truth and find a way to expose it. Daniel nodded, his scarred hands steady as he made his decision. "Then we'd better get started." The past had shaped them both, forged them in the fires of loss and determination. Now, as they prepared to confront the secrets that lay hidden in the depths of the galactic Concord station, they carried with them the weight of the dead and the hope of the living. The real battle was just beginning. The galactic Concord station hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 species conducting business, but beneath the surface calm, Daniel could feel the tension building like pressure in a damaged hull. His sharp hazel eyes tracked the movement of security drones as he walked the observation deck, cataloging escape routes and defensive positions with the unconscious precision of a man who'd learned to expect betrayal. 2 decks below, in the diplomatic quarter's most secure meeting room, Cora sat across from the neutral alien envoy, her auburn hair catching the soft light as she leaned forward with calculated intensity. The bioluminescent being, who had introduced itself as Zephyr of the Trade Collective, pulsed with curious patterns of blue and green, its multiple limbs weaving hypnotic gestures in the air. "The shipping discrepancies you've identified," Zephyr said, its voice like wind through crystalline formations, "they represent more than simple accounting errors. Our trade routes through the outer systems have been disrupted for months." Cora adjusted her glasses, buying herself a moment to process the implications. Her green eyes held the fierce intelligence that had gotten them this far, but she could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. "Disrupted how exactly?" "Cargo delays, rerouted shipments, mysterious technical difficulties that always seem to benefit certain parties." Zephyr's skin shifted to deeper shades of blue. What Cora had learned was a sign of agitation. "The Kha'Vren claim they're maintaining galactic stability, but their definition of stability seems to involve everyone else bearing the cost." Outside the meeting room, Daniel paced the corridor with controlled restlessness, his scarred hands clasped behind his back in the stance that proclaimed his military bearing to anyone who cared to look. The dog tag beneath his uniform felt heavier than usual, Danny's memory a constant reminder of the price of underestimating their enemies. "Captain," came a voice from behind him. Daniel turned to find the engineer approaching, his stocky frame moving with the careful gait of a man who'd spent too many hours in cramped spaces. Oil stains decorated his coveralls like medals, and the stylus in his mouth bobbed with each step. "Status report," Daniel ordered, his voice carrying the clipped authority of a man who'd learned to waste no words. "The port engine's responding to treatment," the engineer reported, spitting out his stylus to speak clearly. "But we've got a bigger problem. I traced those encrypted transmissions. They're coming from Section C, Level 7. That's restricted access, military-grade security." Daniel's jaw clenched, the familiar tell before he made a hard decision. Someone with significant clearance is talking to the Kha'Vren. Any idea who? "Working on it," the engineer replied, his bloodshot eyes bright with the intensity of a man who thrived on technical challenges. "But whoever it is, they're good. Professional-grade encryption, randomized transmission schedules, all the bells and whistles." Inside the meeting room, Cora was making her own discoveries. Zephyr's limbs had stilled. A sign of what she'd learned was deep concentration among the trade collective species. The alien's bioluminescent skin pulsed in slow, rhythmic patterns that reminded her of a heartbeat made visible. "Your species interests me," Zephyr said suddenly, its voice carrying undertones of curiosity. "The Kha'Vren have spent considerable effort convincing the galaxy that humans are problematic. Yet here you are, offering solutions rather than demands." "Perhaps," Cora said carefully, "the galaxy has been given an incomplete picture of humanity's potential." Her fingers drummed against the table. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm that meant her mind was racing through possibilities. "The trade route improvements we've developed aren't just theoretical. We've run successful tests in our own system, increased efficiency by 30% while reducing energy consumption." "Impressive," Zephyr acknowledged, its skin shifting to warmer hues. "But the Kha'Vren claim your technology is unstable, prone to catastrophic failure. They've circulated reports of human vessels lost to fold space anomalies." Cora's green eyes flashed with sudden anger, quickly suppressed. "Those reports are fabricated. Every supposed failure coincides with Kha'Vren patrol activities. It's remarkably convenient how human ships only suffer fold space anomalies when there are no independent witnesses." Zephyr's limbs began weaving again, patterns that spoke of growing interest. "You're suggesting the Kha'Vren have been deliberately sabotaging human vessels?" "I'm suggesting that the evidence supports that conclusion," Cora replied, her diplomatic training keeping her words precise and measured. "The question is whether the galactic community is willing to examine that evidence objectively." 3 levels down, in the engineering section of the Aurora's blade, the engineer was conducting his own investigation. His hands moved across the communication console with practiced efficiency, fingers dancing over controls that most people would find incomprehensible. The stylus had returned to his mouth, a nervous habit that had intensified since their arrival at the station. "Got you, you fool," he muttered around the stylus, his voice tight with satisfaction. The encrypted transmissions were sophisticated, but he'd spent years learning to read between the lines of alien technology. The source was indeed on Level 7, and the encryption signature matched Kha'Vren military protocols. But there was something else, something that made his blood run cold. The transmissions weren't just intelligence reports, they were targeting data. Specifications for human vessels, crew rotations, defensive capabilities. Someone was providing the Kha'Vren with everything they needed to destroy any human ship that left the station. Daniel felt the engineer's urgency before he heard the message, his combat instincts responding to the subtle shift in the ship's ambient sounds. He was moving toward the engineering section before the communication came through, his weathered features hardening into the mask he wore when violence was imminent. "Captain, you need to see this," the engineer's voice crackled through the comm system. "We've got a problem." Daniel arrived to find the engineer hunched over his console, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air recycling through the ship. The stylus was working overtime, moving from mouth to hands and back again in nervous repetition. "Someone's been feeding the Kha'Vren targeting data," the engineer reported, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Our shield frequencies, engine signatures, weapons capabilities, everything they'd need to blow us out of space the moment we leave neutral territory." "Source," Daniel asked, his scarred hands clenching into fists. Still working on it, but the timing suggests someone with access to our system since we arrived. Could be station security, could be someone on our crew. The engineer's eyes met Daniel's, and the unspoken fear passed between them. A traitor among their own people. In the diplomatic quarter, Cora was reaching her own conclusions. Zephyr's skin had shifted to deep purple, a color she'd learned indicated serious concern among the trade collective species. The alien's multiple limbs moved in agitated patterns, weaving complex gestures that spoke of growing alarm. "The implications of what you're suggesting," Zephyr said, its voice carrying harmonics of distress, "they extend far beyond simple trade disputes. If the Kha'Vren have been manipulating galactic commerce for their own benefit, then every species in the galaxy has been paying the price," Cora finished, her green eyes bright with the intensity of discovery. "The question is whether the Concord Authority will act on this information or whether they'll choose to maintain the status quo." Zephyr's limbs stilled, and for a moment the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the station's life support systems. When the alien spoke again, its voice carried the weight of a decision that could reshape galactic politics. "The trade collective has been patient with Kha'Vren excesses," it said slowly. "But patience has limits. If you can provide concrete evidence of their manipulation, we will support humanity's bid for recognition." Cora felt her heart race, but her diplomatic training kept her expression neutral. "Evidence will require access to restricted records, shipping manifests, communication logs, the kind of information that's closely guarded." "The kind of information," Zephyr replied, its skin shifting to colors that might have been amusement, "that might be found in the station's central database, if one knew how to look for it." The offer hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. The trade collective was offering to help humanity access the evidence they needed, but the risks were enormous. If they were caught, it would mean the end of any hope for diplomatic recognition. If they succeeded, it might mean the beginning of a new era for human-alien relations. Daniel's voice crackled through Cora's comm unit, interrupting her thoughts. "We need to talk, now." She excused herself from the meeting, her mind already working through the implications of what she'd learned. The corridor outside the diplomatic quarter seemed darker somehow, filled with shadows that might conceal watching eyes. Daniel was waiting for her at the intersection, his weathered features grave. "The engineer found something," Daniel began, his voice low and urgent as he pulled her into a less trafficked alcove. "Someone on this station is feeding the Kha'Vren targeting data for the Aurora's blade. Our shield frequencies, engine signatures, weapons capabilities, everything they'd need to blow us out of space the moment we leave neutral territory." Cora's breath hitched. "And I just got an offer from Zephyr. The trade collective will support humanity's bid for recognition if we can provide concrete evidence of the Kha'Vren's manipulation of galactic commerce. They even hinted at how to access the station's central database." Daniel's eyes, sharp and calculating, met hers. "So we have a traitor providing our death warrant, and a potential ally offering us a key to expose the Kha'Vren's entire operation. The risks are astronomical, Cora." "But the reward, Daniel," she countered, her voice firm. "A chance for humanity to secure its place, not just survive. My father believed we could find our place among the stars, and your hesitation at Kepler Station cost lives. We can't hesitate now." He nodded slowly, the ghost of Donnie's dog tag warm against his chest. "No, we can't. What's the plan?" "The station's central database is the key to everything," Cora explained, her mind already formulating the steps. "It contains all trade logs, shipping manifests, and communication records. If we can access it, we can prove the Kha'Vren have been hoarding resources, manipulating prices, and sabotaging human vessels." Zephyr indicated the database is on level 7, secured by military-grade encryption. "The same level where the engineer traced the encrypted transmissions," Daniel mused, a grim realization dawning. "Our traitor is likely involved with the database, or at least has high-level access to it." "Precisely," Cora confirmed. "We need to get into that database, download the relevant data, and then present it to the Concord Authority with the trade collective's backing. But we have to be careful. If the Kha'Vren or their accomplice on the station find out, it's over." "And the traitor!" Daniel asked, his voice hard. "We can't leave them active. They're a direct threat to our survival." "The engineer is trying to pinpoint the exact source," Cora replied. "Once he does, we'll deal with them. But the priority is the data. We have less than 2 days before the Aurora's blade is repaired enough to be a target again." They returned to the Aurora's blade, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. The engineer was still hunched over his console, a grim determination etched on his face. "Any luck with the source?" Daniel asked, his voice low. "I've narrowed it down," the engineer reported, not looking up. "The transmissions are originating from a specific terminal in the station's security hub, Level 7. And the access codes used, they belong to Commander Valerius, head of Concord Station Security." Daniel's jaw tightened. Valerius, the same one who greeted us upon arrival, all smiles and false hospitality. "He's been feeding them everything," the engineer continued, his voice laced with disgust. "Our ship schematics, our crew manifest, even our projected departure time, he's planning to hand us over the moment we leave neutral space." "We need to move fast," Cora interjected, her diplomatic calm replaced by a steely resolve. "If Valerius is the traitor, he'll be monitoring our every move. We need to get into that database before he realizes we're onto him." Their plan began to take shape. While the engineer worked on a way to create a temporary, undetectable backdoor into the station's network, Daniel and Cora would prepare for a direct infiltration of Level 7. They knew the risks were immense, but the stakes were too high to falter. The following day, under the guise of an official inspection of the Aurora's blade's repairs, Daniel and Cora moved through the station. Daniel, with his military bearing, drew the attention of security patrols, creating diversions, while Cora, disguised as a station technician, slipped through less guarded access points. Cora's heart pounded as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors of Level 7. The air here was colder, the silence more profound, broken only by the hum of unseen machinery. She reached the security hub, a reinforced chamber with a single heavily guarded entrance. Through the transparent wall, she could see Commander Valerius, his back to her, deeply engrossed at a console. Meanwhile, Daniel engaged a patrol of station security guards near a busy cargo bay. "Just ensuring proper safety protocols are being observed," he said, his voice calm, his eyes scanning for any sign of Valerius's awareness. His presence was a calculated distraction, drawing attention away from Cora's critical mission. Inside the hub, Cora took a deep breath. This was it. She activated a small handheld device the engineer had given her, a signal jammer designed to briefly disrupt local comms and surveillance. As the hub's internal comms crackled with static, she moved swiftly, her fingers flying across a hidden panel, overriding the door lock. Valerius spun around, startled by the sudden silence in the opening door. His eyes widened in surprise as he saw Cora. What are you doing here?" "Exposing a traitor, Commander," Cora replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She moved past him, heading directly for the central database terminal. Valerius lunged, but Daniel, having anticipated a confrontation, burst through the door, his movements swift and precise. He intercepted Valerius, engaging him in a quick, brutal hand-to-hand struggle. Daniel's combat training, honed by years of desperate missions, gave him the edge. Valerius, caught off guard and relying on his authority rather than his fighting skills, was quickly subdued. "Engineer, now!" Daniel barked into his comm, holding Valerius in a tight lock. From the Aurora's blade, the engineer, who had been monitoring the situation, unleashed the backdoor program. On the central database terminal, a flurry of data scrolled across the screen as Cora initiated the download. She worked with frantic speed, copying encrypted trade logs, falsified shipping manifests, and communication intercepts that clearly showed the Kha'Vren's systematic manipulation of galactic commerce and their deliberate sabotage of human vessels. As the data streamed into her secure drive, the station's alarms began to blare, a piercing wail that signaled their discovery. Valerius, regaining some composure, snarled, "You fools! You've just signed humanity's death warrant. The Kha'Vren will crush you." "Not if the galaxy sees the truth first," Cora retorted, pulling the drive from the terminal. "Daniel, we need to go." They raced through the blaring corridors, Daniel keeping Valerius incapacitated and using him as a shield against the arriving security forces. The engineer, meanwhile, had begun to flood the station's public comm channels with a pre-recorded message from Cora outlining their findings and calling for an emergency session of the Concord Authority. They made it back to the Aurora's blade, barely. The ship was still undergoing repairs, but the engineer had managed to get the main thrusters online. As Daniel secured the airlock, the ship shuddered, the sounds of distant explosions echoing through the hull. The Kha'Vren, alerted by Valerius, were making their move, attempting to breach the neutral zone. "They're coming!" the engineer shouted, his face pale. "They're ignoring the Concord Authority's warnings." "They won't get us," Daniel said, his voice grim but resolute. He turned to Cora. "Get that data to Zephyr. We need the trade collective to back us up now." Cora, clutching the data drive, ran to the comm station. She established a secure link with Zephyr, whose bioluminescent skin pulsed with alarm. "Zephyr, the data. It's all here. Proof of the Kha'Vren's deception, their sabotage, their manipulation. We need your support to present this to the Concord Authority immediately." Zephyr's multiple limbs wove agitated patterns, its voice like a chorus of wind chimes. "This is unprecedented. The Kha'Vren are violating neutral space." "They're desperate," Cora said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "They know the truth is out. If they can silence us before we speak, they win." Outside, the Aurora's blade bucked violently as Kha'Vren plasma fire hammered its weakened shields. The engineer worked furiously to reroute power, but the ship was a sitting duck. "We need a distraction," Daniel roared, his scarred hands gripping the command console. "Something to buy Cora time." A desperate idea sparked in Cora's mind. "The quantum fold drive," she shouted over the alarms. "It's still experimental, but if we can engage it, even for a moment, it might create a localized fold space anomaly. It won't get us far, but it could disrupt their targeting systems." The engineer looked at her, his eyes wide. "It's a huge risk. It could tear the ship apart." "Do it," Daniel ordered, his decision made. "It's our only chance." With a surge of power, the Aurora's blade's experimental quantum fold drive flared to life. The ship vibrated violently, a deep resonant hum filling the bridge. Outside, a shimmering distortion appeared around the Aurora's blade, causing the incoming Kha'Vren plasma bolts to swerve wildly, missing their target. The Kha'Vren ships, caught off guard by the unexpected anomaly, hesitated, their targeting systems thrown into disarray. This momentary disruption was all Cora needed. She sent the comprehensive data package to Zephyr, along with a direct plea for immediate intervention from the Trade Collective and the Concord Authority. Within moments, the Concord Authority's central AI broadcast a galaxy-wide message, its neutral voice now laced with urgency. "Attention all galactic species. Urgent evidence of widespread economic manipulation and hostile actions by the Kha'Vren Imperium has been presented to the Concord Authority. All trade routes involving Kha'Vren vessels are hereby suspended. All Kha'Vren military assets are ordered to withdraw from neutral space immediately or face the full force of the Galactic Concord's combined fleet." A collective gasp went through the Aurora's blade's bridge. The Kha'Vren, caught in the act and facing the united might of the galaxy, began to retreat, their predatory patience replaced by a panicked scramble. The blockade, which had held for years, was shattered not by force, but by truth. Days later, the Aurora's blade was in a secure dry dock, undergoing extensive repairs. Daniel stood on the observation deck, watching the repairs, his scarred hands finally at rest. The dog tag, Danny's dog tag, still hung around his neck, but its weight felt different now. Less a burden of guilt, more a symbol of lessons learned and battles won. Cora joined him, her auburn hair loose, her glasses pushed up on her nose. Her green eyes, though tired, sparkled with a quiet triumph. "The Concord Authority has officially recognized humanity's right to full participation in galactic commerce and diplomacy," she announced, her voice soft. "The Trade Collective has already begun negotiations for new, equitable trade routes, and our quantum fold technology is being hailed as a breakthrough." Daniel nodded, a rare small smile touching his lips. "And Valerius?" "He's facing charges of treason and economic sabotage," Cora replied. The evidence was undeniable. His connections to the Kha'Vren's illicit operations went deep. "And the Kha'Vren?" "They're in disarray," Cora said. Their economic empire is crumbling and their reputation is in tatters. They'll be facing sanctions and investigations for decades. Their reign of fear is over. He looked out at the vast expanse of the station, now bustling with renewed purpose, no longer shadowed by the Kha'Vren threat. We did it, Cora. We actually did it. We did, she agreed, her hand resting lightly on his arm. But it's just the beginning. Humanity has a long way to go, but now we have a chance. A real chance to find our place among the stars, not as primitives, but as equals. Daniel felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, a feeling he hadn't known since before Kepler Station. The ghosts of the past would always be there, but now they were joined by the promise of a future. The blockade was broken, the truth revealed, and humanity's journey into the vast unknown galaxy had truly begun. The real battle was over, and humanity had won.